News Week. So it's Mark Lauder and host of The Next Revolution with Steve Hilton on the Fox News Channel. Steve Hilton, also the author of Positive Populism. Get your dozen copies today. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
The beginning of another exciting news week. So let's talk about the agitation and the activation and the agony and the organization of these two parties. Who has the mighty mo coming out of the Kavanaugh confirmation?
No question it's the Republicans right now, but the key phrase is what you touched on earlier. You used the words top of their minds when they come to vote. That's a hell of a long way to go, actually, in terms of the news cycle between now and when most people vote. What will be at the top of their minds then? I'd be surprised if it's the Kavanaugh effect is still lingering on, unless something new happens to keep it going. Now, the president's good at that. He's good at getting people exercised and worked up over things, so maybe he's got something up his sleeve. Maybe the Democrats will make the mistake of going on about it and promising these investigations and keeping the pot boiling. But unless something like that happens, I think there's a chance it could fade away. So the Republicans will need something else to get their side out come election day.
Well, there's no doubt the president will have probably a dozen something else's between now and the midterms, if history is any guide. But it's interesting because if everyone turns out to vote, which could happen, we could have very high voter turnout for the midterms, and you have equal excitement on both sides. What happens then? Do they cancel each other out?
To a certain extent. I mean, if you go back in July, you look at enthusiasm, Democrats had a 16-point lead. That has now fallen to 4 points. I saw a poll out today that said independent voters, because this is really what we're talking about, are the independents. They disapprove of the Democrats' handling of the Kavanaugh situation by 28 points. That's devastating. And when you're a middle-of-the-road, moderate, maybe what they used to call a blue dog Democrat, and you look to see, A, how they treated this man, but B, look at the rallies, look at the protests, look at the clawing at the doors of the Supreme Court, do you even recognize the Democrat Party anymore? And for many people in the middle, the answer may be no.
Yeah, and you know, he talks about blue dog Democrats, but there's also liberty-minded Republicans who feel left out in the cold here. But there are some surprisingly close Republican races. Mia Love is in the fight for her young political career in Utah. Rick Scott having a tough time in his Senate fight in Florida. You've got all these races across the land which are so close. Martha McSally running as a Republican for that Senate seat in Arizona. So if you are a Republican strategist and you're talking to your door knockers and your fundraisers, what do you tell them makes the difference?
So I think that in order to make the difference, you need to frame this up as just not an issue about Judge Kavanaugh and his confirmation, but rather as a window into what will happen if the Democrats retake power in 2019.
Jerry Nadler, who might chair a key committee in the House, he's talking about essentially the possibility of an impeachment hearing for Justice Kavanaugh and all sorts of investigations. Is that what voters want from the Democrat Party?
Absolutely not. And we've seen this already play out with Tom Steyer's impeachment campaign with the president. That issue plays horribly among voters, particularly independent voters, like Mark was talking about. People do not want to see the president impeached. They definitely don't want to see Justice Kavanaugh impeached. And so I think that in addition to framing it up as sort of, you know, this crystal ball into what will happen next year, I think that they also need to play up what you said, it being a cultural issue. If we're going to be a country that no longer recognizes people being innocent until proven guilty, that's a huge cultural paradigmatic shift.
It also goes to show you how important the Supreme Court really is. Because the president talked about it, and he talked about it on the campaign trail, and he said this is the most important decision a president can make, and he may have one or more picks in the rest of his first term, and certainly if he has a second term. Does that weigh on voters' minds right now?
I think not as much as the point that you just made, which is the fear of this kind of loony left mob taking over. I think that is a very powerful message, but I do think also that especially the independent voters that you touched on, some of the more basic issues, the economic issues, are going to be really important. But again, it's not, no one's going to vote out of gratitude for the good economy, for the jobs, and that's all. You can talk all you like about the record, but you're not going to get votes.
The status quo doesn't get people as excited.
You've got to say this all goes away if the Democrats